So I'm being supported by my wonderful son Kai today, and we've come back indoors after our freezing thing yesterday, and Sir David can be unwrapped now because we are back, and he's going to join us again. Don't try this at home with any national treasures, because that wouldn't be fair on the national treasures themselves. But what we're going to do now is, now that we're inside, we're going to explore competition in animals. Okay, so when we were outside we were looking at competition in plants. We're now going to explore competition in animals. So we need to think about the different things that animals will compete against other animals for, both within their own species. So that might be tigers competing with tigers. There we go, Sir David, my friend. So it might be tigers competing with other tigers, or it might be tigers competing with lions. Okay, so if it's tigers competing with other tigers in a very Joe exotic kind of Tiger King kind of way, then what we do is we say that it's intra-species competition. And when it's between different species, so between tigers and lions, for example, we call that inter-species. So it's between two different species as they compete. So what I've got here is one of my gaming boards from something that I play sometimes with little wall figures and play games like that. But I'm going to use it today to represent a habitat. So if we imagine that this is one habitat and it's a couple of miles across, the conditions are very, very similar. We've got a mixture of terrain, so we've got like obviously a hill here, and the conditions up here would be fairly similar to wherever else, but it may be a little bit windier or it may be a little bit drier. And then here I'm using this little glasses cleaner thing to represent some water, because that's obviously really important to us. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to represent the species, but this could be any species. I'm going to talk about interspecies competition, and then I'll talk about intra-species. So what we've got is we've got a little rodent here, and he's going to be represented, or she's going to be represented, by a little blue piece of paper, a little bit of post-it note. And then we've got here, we've got an eagle, which is going to be represented by a pink little bit of paper post-it note thing there. Okay, so what we've got is we've got the predator and we've got the prey in terms of their relationship. But within our ecosystem, what we've got is we've got a community where we've got interdependence. So lots of the living things in this habitat rely on each other. So for example, this little rodent here relies on grass for food. But then what we might have is we might have a raspberry bush somewhere that relies on the little mammal to eat its berries, disappear off a little bit further over, have a poo, and then that poo would contain the seeds from the raspberry bush, and therefore what we get is we get dispersal. So different things rely on each other for different things. But what we've got here is we've got our population of prey, and we've got a population of predators. Okay, so if we imagine that we take our prey, our little mammal, and we spread them out, you can see we've got plenty here, right? Now what they'll do is they will compete with each other for the available resources. So they'll compete with each other for space, because they need somewhere to live and somewhere to thrive, and different living creatures, different living organisms need different amounts of space for different things. So you might find that a tiger, and I keep going back to that example, a tiger might need a large area and it's very, very territorial, whereas something like a small mammal might not need anywhere near as much that kind of space. Okay, what they also compete for is water, and so the amount of water that's available in a particular habitat would be really important. They also compete for food, so here we've got plenty of food in terms of the grass that the little thing would eat, and what you would find is that the population would increase, but it would reach a point where it was unable to increase anymore because of the availability of resources. And we can show this on this predator-prey graph using this nice little bit of paper. So what we'll find is that within a particular habitat, the number of prey over time will increase. The number of our mammals will increase. However, there will be a point where the resources available can only support a particular level of population. So it might start to flatline a little bit there. And one of the other factors that might affect the number of this particular kind of mammal is the availability of mates. So that we don't mean friends, like going to the cinema or texting each other or going on Instagram. We're talking about reproduction, okay? So that will affect it as well. Now, at some point, we may introduce a predator. So here we've got our predator, this eagle, and it would swoop in and it would eat up our little mammal there. And what we would find, I'll just leave that there so you remember, is we would find that the population of the predator is linked to the population of the prey. So if we just scatter a couple of these here, so what we've got is, as there's food available for our predator, then what you find is the population of the prey will decrease. So I can just scrape some of those off. So our eagles have eaten some of these mammals and stuck to the board. Probably should have used something that was a bit better there. And what you would find on our predator prey graph is you would find that the population of our predator, which was lower, starts to increase. Now what happens is, as it starts to increase, so as it starts to go up, it's eating the prey, so the number of prey goes down, because obviously the predator's involved. And what that means is they'll reach a point where there just isn't enough prey for all of the predators, so the number of predators would go down. Now as the number of predators goes down, the number of prey goes back up. And then because the number of prey goes back up, guess what happens to the number of predators? You find that the number of predators goes back up. And as the number of predators goes back up, the number of prey comes down. And because the number of prey comes down, the predators come down again. And we call that the predator-prey cycle. And that happens all of the time. And what you might find is that as the number of our prey goes down, then we might get some of these predators moving out into a different habitat. So what that would mean is we then get an increase in the number of prey, and because there was more prey, we might get more predators coming back in. And then what that would do is that would mean that we had fewer and fewer prey, and that'll just go on and on, that cycle, time after time after time. So that's our predator-prey cycle. Now that's competition between the prey for the grass and the things that it eats, the water. Then we've got the competition within the predators. So they would all be competing, these different eagles would all be competing for the available prey in there. But sometimes what you get is, if we take this here, we take an example of a human. So here's Harley Quinn, right? So we take her as a human, and what you might find is you might find that you get a predator coming along. So there would be competition. See, it's an actual predator. Lego, but an actual predator. So what you would see is you would see the predator coming along and eating the prey, but the predator would be in competition with other predators for the humans. But then what you might get, that's intra-species. Then you would maybe get some inter-species competition. So there we've got an alien, so alien versus predator. So what we've got is, we've got some inter-species competition for the prey. But then what might happen over a longer period of time is we might end up with a super predator. So here is a bit more camouflaged, and this super predator will strengthen these predators over here. So the number of these predators increases, while the number of those predators, because they're getting less food, goes down. But that can have a massive impact on the prey that's in there. So what happens is we find that animals compete for space. So whether that's in trees or whether that's burrows, whether it's shared, whether things live in communities, a bit like meerkats, or they live in isolation, like particular kinds of big cats, for example, or bears. They would compete for water. So we need to make sure that there's plenty of water available, because that's a necessary requirement for them. And both of these things here are abiotic factors. So they're non-biological things that will affect the population. Okay, so animals compete, and we've got the two types of competition. We've got the inter and we've got the intra, and then we've also got, they compete for food, whether that's the little mammal competing for grass or for berries, and we've also got the competition for mates. So if we have a look here, we just move our predators out of the way for a little bit. If we have a look here, then what you'll find is that there will be competition for mates. And if there aren't sufficient men to women in a ratio, then that population cannot increase anymore. So those kind of things will affect that population, leading to our predator-prey cycle. And just finally, we then start to think about how humans interact with our environment and our habitat. And not next lesson, but the lesson after, we'll start to look at hunters. So here we have the Mandalorian, which is an example of a bounty hunter. Just thought I'd throw that in there just to mention it. So, competition. Animals compete for space, water, food and mates. And we need to know which ones are abiotic and which ones are biotic, and start talking about those terms. And we talked before about plants. So plants need space, nutrients, sunlight or light, and water as well. So that's what they compete for. So plants and animals compete for resources, even if it doesn't look like it. And it's not quite as active as this predator or this predator swooping in. Where's me? Even if it doesn't always look as active as that, we've got competition going on. So inter, between different species, intra, between a particular species. So that's it. Come back to teams and we'll answer some questions and we'll move on from there. I hope that made sense. Made a little bit of a mess. Showed off some of these little bits, but that's good enough for me. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay awesome.